Mahi, everyone. Oh, that was loud. Cool. My name's Jonathan. I'm from New Zealand Esports. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. I hope you had a great day learning about a whole bunch of new innovative technologies and things you can do in the classroom. I'm here today to talk to you about esports, which is definitely happening in your classroom, whether you know about it or not. And hopefully, by the end of the session, like Greg said, you will just know a little bit more about exactly what esports is, how it works, the world behind it, and where our young people are spending a phenomenal amount of their time. Does my clicker work? All right, so New Zealand Esports, if you didn't know, in 2020 was recognised by Sport New Zealand, who's the sport equivalent of the MOE, as an official sport in New Zealand. Since then, we've been operating around the country trying to make gaming and esports a safer and more inclusive place. But I think to start off with, let's ask the big question. What is esports? I think if you were to say, just a quick show of hands, who thinks that esports is gaming? That's like an A for achievement level answer. All right, there's room for improvement. Technically correct, but esports is competitive gaming. The best analogy I can give is if you think about esports and gaming as like recreational versus competitive, if you go to the beach with some friends, you throw a ball around, I hope you don't, but you go to parties and tell your friends that you're an All Black. Whereas esports is that competitive spirit. It's the coming to practice, it's working with a team, it's self-sacrifice, it's learning about teamwork, communication, and all those bits and pieces. But what I found is the best way to kind of show people what esports is who might not be doing it on a daily basis is to show you. And so may I please, and I'm going to ask kindly at first and then I'll be vicious and pick you, volunteer to come up and play a little bit of esports for the room. Can I get some volunteers? We've got one over here. I love the quick hand. And can we get one more? We're going to go over here. Yeah, so just come up on stage, everyone. And we're going to experience some esports. We'll see if that sound works. All right, thank you two very much. Just what I'm going to do is I'm going to approximately split this auditorium in half. So you're on that side, yeah, perfect. Everyone on this side. So everyone on this side of the room, your champion is now Chris. All right, can I get some cheers for Chris? Another A for achievement. This side of the room, your champion is now Lisa. Can I get some cheers for Lisa? Chris, I'm going to get you to come over to the computer, come over here. We're going to give you a real quick tutorial. You've played Pac-Man before? You've seen Pac-Man before? Awesome. All right, so you are on arrow keys. You're on AWS. Do you know WSD? Okay, so you're on WSD. You're basically going to hit start. You have 90 seconds. Collect as many coins as you can. All right? So, take your stations. On your marks. Get set. Go. All right, so we've got Chris is player 1 and Alicia is player 2. The score's up the top here. Now this is our game called Play Life Balance. Basically Pac-Man. However,
this is smooth.
He's not moving. The players are trying to collect as many coins they can. Berocca tablets in the corner will give you a speed boost. We have the hyperfiber Ethernet lanes along the sides, which speed them up for a little while. The interesting thing about this game is that we have our rest zone in the middle. You can see our fatigue meters in the corner. You need to stop in the rest zone. Chris, go to the rest zone. You're gonna burn out. If you don't spend too much time taking regular breaks, you end up burning out, crashing, falling asleep. Even though you want to stick out there getting as many coins as you can, if you don't take those regular breaks, this is what happens. You burn out, you crash. You burn out, you crash, and you need to take a big break. We've got 25 seconds left to go. Now in our last 15 seconds, we're going to have a Berocca tablet spawn because actually diet is really important for gaining your mental, physical health as well. So picking up those apples is an extra point. So you see a Berocca tablet tube there, pick that up. Boost around the room. All right, 10 seconds left, everyone. Let's go, your champions. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and that's game. Thank you. Thanks for your volunteering. We'll hook you up with some Kit Kats afterwards. 171, that's not a bad score. We did a competition today at our stall, and I think 180 was the highest score of the day. And so that is not a bad effort. So that's a real quick, fun example of what esports is about. A lot of people who don't play games regularly, they might look at esports being played on some computers and think what is this? Why is this interesting? But it really is just competition. It's just a group of people getting together to play, compete, and have some fun in all sorts of wacky and wild worlds. Well, that's a really, we'll call it a noob-friendly introduction to esports. I want to show you what it looks like at an international level, what it really looks like out there in the wild. So this next video I'm about to show you is from Sydney IEM, a competition in 2023. This is at Darling Harbour Stadium downtown Sydney. 9,000 seats, completely sold out, $300 a ticket, and they broke the all-time sales record here for ticket sales. And this is where our young people are. So this is basically like a crazy mix between Microsoft Excel and The Sevens. It gets pretty wild. But it really is like a part of this is a stage show. We're watching players playing various different esports. This particular one is not primary school friendly. But definitely a good time for a lot of our older esports enjoyers. And it's a bit of a mix between the WWE, some fun times on stage, some stage antics. And it's crazy to see this many people inside a stadium really getting out there and enjoying some esports. And it's not just happening internationally. This is also happening in our backyards. This event here is the Spark Game Arena event that happened at Spark Arena September last year, where we had a massive Fortnite tournament, $200,000 prizes up for grabs. We had a 14-year-old who won first place. And as you can see, it's just massive production, interest, participation. And this is happening in our backyards. And then we had this happen in August of last year. So this is at the International Olympic Committee's OGM, and our President Thomas Bach is about to make an announcement.
With your vote, you have created the Olympic Esports Games. Congratulations and thank you very much.
Sorry, I just realized my game's running in the background. We don't want that noise happening. Sorry to the sound guy for making you go through that. So that was the Olympic Committee president announcing that there is going to be an Olympic Esports Games. I don't know if you've heard it. So there's not going to be a Winter Games, the Summer Games, and the Esports Games. And they're going to happen in a cycle like that. Esports Olympic Games are happening every 2 years, sort of go summer, esports, winter, esports, summer, etc., at least for the next 12 years. So in 2027, we are going to have Kiwis representing our country under the Olympic rings in gaming for the first time, which is going to be really, really cool. And this question always, especially when I'm talking with parents, prompts the question, why esports? How is this even going to happen? Why is the Olympics even interested in stuff like this? Well, the answer is esports, my pointer, is bigger than you think. It's massive globally. And I'm going to give you some examples here. The film industry, last year, all of the Marvel box offices, the massive salaries you hear movie stars getting paid, they made about $100 billion in revenue last year. The music industry, all of the Spotify sales, the concerts, Beyonce, Taylor Swift, all the record releases, they made about $75 billion worth of revenue last year. Gaming did more than the movie and the music industry combined, with $187 billion in revenue last year. It is an absolutely gargantuan beast. The largest esport in the world in recent history, League of Legends, had over 180 million monthly players. When we start talking about numbers this big, it's really easy to lose scale. 180 million monthly players is bigger than Russia. It would be the 8th largest country in the entire world if it was a country. And this is just one of our games. And interestingly enough, this is a really interesting one, or key one, is under 34s are now more likely to watch an esports event than a sporting event. And every year, next year, when I come here and say this again, there's going to be under 35s, under 36s, etc. Young people are opting to watch much more esports content because massive viewerships, everyone's gaming. And so it is a lot bigger than you think. And that's exactly why we exist. So New Zealand Esports is the national sporting organisation. We're the peak body for esports in New Zealand. We are the equivalent of New Zealand Rugby, Football NZ, Basketball NZ, and it's our job to support, grow, and lead esports in New Zealand from a sporting perspective. We do that in a few different ways. One is inclusive participation. It's things like making sure gaming is a safe space for all people of any different diversity of ranges. It's to educate people on exactly what esports is, which is what we're here doing today, and making sure that people understand the dangers around gaming, which I will talk about. It's also to do things like manage our integrity. Interestingly enough, one of the core ways we operate in schools is that if you were to run a netball team and you were to get a teacher who's to come in and team manage that netball team, the second they step onto the school grounds, they would need to be police vetted. There's legislation in place in Oranga Tamariki to protect students engaging with external operators like that. They never considered when they were writing that legislation about people would be able to do sports online, and that these team managers may be interacting with your students online. And so part of what we do is to make sure is that when you're participating in esports in your school, that it's done safely. And there's a level of protection and safeguarding for students, for operators, for the publishers who release these games. And then also empowerment is another big piece of what we do, is that esports is happening right now at a time where our young people are being given really difficult choices. We saw that Spark event earlier where that young man, 14 years old, he won a really huge prize pool, hundreds of thousands of dollars, life-changing amounts of money. And it's a real possibility that a professional team, like the Premier League, would reach out to him and try and recruit him to play for an American team or an Asian team with a really big salary involved. We're talking really big money for these types of events. And that can be really dangerous because it's incredibly tempting and follow their dreams, but what happens to their education? What happens to their careers after they get sort of churned up and spit out of this, this crazy whirlwind of the esports ecosystem? And so we work really closely to ensure that people who do have these opportunities can grab them without having to necessarily sacrifice their education. They can move into high-value careers after their esports careers, and that it becomes a positive choice and not a sacrifice that they're choosing between two great things in their life or that'll be useful for them for the rest of their life. So those are some of the things that we do at New Zealand Esports and why we exist. We cover a whole lot of different esports. If you don't know, esports is not a sport. It is like 50 sports. We have a big spectrum of what we consider esports from a virtual sport place. Has anyone ever ridden a Zwift before or spin bike or anything? So virtual sports are things where you can literally jump on a bike and pedal and your physical inertia is translated digitally into a screen and you could be racing people around the rings of Saturn, for example. But you're physically working. If you're unfit, you do not stand a chance. A lot of our members who play in the online leagues, they're like ex-Olympians. They'll get on their road bikes. They're really fit people. So stuff that translates 100% to the real world, to things that virtual, like HADO, which I'll show you in a moment, VR, things like sim racing, which kind of translate to the real world, all the way to video games, which is what is most popular with young people's space, which is those fantastical out there worlds of video games. You're sitting down playing, a flying horse who attacks a donkey, doing whatever. Those are the video games that we cover, and all of those are under our umbrella and what we'll be competing in the Olympics. An example of that is HADO. HADO is a virtual esport, a virtual sport coming out, and it's basically virtual dodgeball. So the players are physically on the court. They have AR masks on, so they see through them, they see everything that they would, except they also see these new objects within their spatial reality, like energy balls. You pull your hand back and it generates an energy ball. The faster you move your hand, the faster it moves. You can generate shields, jump around. So it's basically dodgeball with a few other elements involved. This here is like live footage. The other stuff is marketing footage. There's a little bit of a difference. We actually have a team next weekend, a New Zealand team heading over to Shanghai to compete in the World Championships for this. They came 8th in the world last year. And it just goes to show the variety. The esports isn't always exactly what you think it is. There's something for everyone, and that's one of the reasons that it gets or is so popular. It can look like the Zwifts, where you're physically on a bike. It can look like the sim racing, where your skills and your braking points and your canvas, if you're an F1 fan, is exactly the same as the real world. Or it can be completely controller, you're living in this fantasy world, or this parallel world where you might be playing an NBA player like you saw in the earlier video. But what's happening with gaming outside of the competitive space? Well, we know that that gaming is becoming the new social gathering place for our young people. They come home from school, they're on games, they're using it to communicate with each other. When they come to school, they're talking about last night's games. It's their social glue. We also know that Kiwis is playing more video games than anything else that they're doing. It is the #1 activity that young people are spending their free time on. 81 minutes per day on average, more than TikTok, more than social media. During COVID, we saw that a lot of parents, 76% of them, used it as a family bonding experience. Playing games with their children was a way that they could bond as a family. And interestingly, 65% of the students who play esports in our league self-reported that it made them more excited to come to school. But I think the real important thing about esports in schools is the fact that it's an opportunity to teach young people about discipline, teamwork, communication, and emotional regulation. When you're playing a physical sport and something doesn't go your way or you lose, then you learn to physically kind of like release that emotion. But it's not always that easy in front of a screen. And so we think that this is a unique opportunity to have our young people learn how to deal with those emotions through esports. Is anyone here from Manurewa? No? Well, this is a case study that we did just down the road at Manurewa High School about what esports actually looks like in schools today.
Honestly, the first thing Mr. Vanguard, my teacher, when he offered to start an esports club, I was like, what are you on about, bro? In my wildest dreams, I would imagine an esports club.
A lot of the boys were more distant from me, but now I've gotten much closer. Good environment, quite like a family, I guess.
We put it out there and we asked of the year 90 Kent students who would like to join in. So of the 900 students that we have at school, we had to have 400 like to apply for League of Legends.
With the introduction of an esports team, I finally have a way to represent my school because I'm not really one to play any of the traditional sports.
Clubs being in schools and definitely improved my attendance rate, I said yes.
Gaming is perceived still in society as a antisocial behaviour, that it's done by people who just sit by themselves in a dark room, living still with their parents at the age of 30 and sitting down there playing a game. There's still that stigma, there's still that perception that gaming is antisocial. For me, the biggest thing is to show parents and everyone, hey, that is not a gamer nowadays. If anything, a gamer is more involved with other people around the world, communicating with them through these games than ever before.
I really think that esports will continue to grow in schools. It's more, maybe most teachers accept the fact that sports come in different kind of areas.
You've got millions of people who are going to be watching the World Finals for League of Legends. So many people. What we did as children isn't what our grandchildren are going to be doing. Life changes, things change. Our students like it, our children like it, and it's something that's going to be coming into school.
Messages in that video. And one of the highlights that we pulled out of this when this was being filmed was that we really learned that esports, a big myth in esports that we busted, is that esports isn't as well as sport, not an instead of. We aren't seeing kids choosing to play esports instead of sport. They're actually doing both. And actually, we're seeing a different movement, the opposite movement, where kids who are playing games in school are growing in confidence in their friend groups, and they're more likely to participate in other school activities. One of the examples that we have that I love to tell the story of is a man called Rowan Crothers. Rowan is an Australian. He has cerebral palsy, and he tells his story as he felt like he looked like and was treated a little bit like an alien in the classroom. He looked different than the other kids. He wasn't able to make those connections. He wasn't able to make any friends. And it was through gaming, his other classmates queued up with him, and once he stepped through that veil out of the physical world and into the digital world, all of that difference disappeared. And they started to really get to know who he was for who he really was, and how funny he was, and how sharp he was. And he was awesome at this particular game in Valorant. And that connection, that friend group, gave him the confidence to then go and join the school's swimming team. Rowan Crothers is now a 2-time gold medalist Paralympian for Australia because of that transition that he was able to do with his confidence and his peer groups into transitioning into sport. We heard this story and we wondered if that's something that happens commonly, and it is. We found that in schools, there was a lot of myths that we were busting, that 61% of students had a similar experience. That 70%, here we go, that 70, or students, gamers in schools were 70% more active actually than the typical Kiwi. We found if we went into a school and asked the first 15 rugby team, like, hey, how many of you guys are competing every night at esports or gaming? And most of them would put their hands up. And that 91%, which is our most important stat, 91% of them said that they made real life friends through their online experiences. People see the online world as parasocial relationships as not real, but for our young people, it is the place that they are now being social. And this is their sporting ground. And there's an opportunity for us here to really take hold of it. We do that through our E-Blacks. The E-Blacks are the All Blacks for esports. They're our national team who go and compete at different world championships across the globe. They played in the Commonwealth Games in 2022. We go to world championships and global games every year. And the E-Blacks will be representing New Zealand at the Olympic Esports Games in 2027. So if your kids want to become a professional gamer, which I guarantee all of them probably do if you asked, they'll be coming through our pathways. But the problem that we have, and what we want to come and talk to your students about, is the very first thing we do when we recruit a new E-Blacks team or a new E-Blacks player is we have to untrain them. All of the bad habits that they've picked up from years and years of gaming in an unregulated, unsupervised environment. One of those aspects we want to talk about is brain overtraining. If I was to run around this auditorium, I reckon twice, 3 times, my lungs would tell me very quickly that I'm done. When your brain is done, when it's checked out, it doesn't give us the same signals that our body is that we're used to. It doesn't give us pain and hurt and out of breath. It just kind of starts to fade out and go into autopilot, that brain fog. And our young people, they don't know this. No one's ever told them that. And so what it does is, especially when they're gaming, and especially when they're gaming without schedule or regulation, it means that it's very easy for them to go into brain fog mode, into autopilot, and overconsume digital content very, very heavily. So one of the first things we do is train them the signs, things like tired eyes, checking in with themselves to how they're feeling emotionally on whether or not they've had enough screen time or not. 2 hours is way more than enough. Even our most elite players, they can't, at a high performance level, focus for more than 2 hours at a time. And there's no way that our young people can either. And so setting up those guidelines to let them know that you can overtrain your brain and how to check out those signs. The other thing is that we'd like to teach our E-Blacks and our young people is how our physical bodies is linked to our mind. This here is a scan of our brain, probably what your brain looks like right now. We took a scan of it. We've got a little bit of the frontal cortex, some activity going on, just listening, sitting down, sit entry. If you were to get up and do 20 minutes of exercise, this is what your brain looks like. So when we're talking about competing at an international event and potentially winning a big amount of prize money, which brain would you rather have? And that's due to physical activity. Hydration is another really important aspect. Just 1% dehydrated, we're all thinking about reaching for your water bottles, can have up to a 5% decrease in cognitive performance. Can you imagine if in any other sport I told you that you could increase your 100-meter sprint time by 5% just by taking a sip of water beforehand? They'd probably ban water from the Olympics. That's what you can do with esports. And also, the most important one is emotional regulation. We have a lot of neuroscientific research to support the fact that any less than 8 hours of sleep, no matter what they tell you, reliably triggers an increase in emotional irritability and emotional volatility, especially in young people. Your sleep is so important for your mood and your attitude, and getting into a good sleep routine and sleep pattern is really important for being good at games. So when you hear those stories of kids raging and smashing their keyboards and fists through the screen, they need to take a nap. Usually the kids think they've grown out of that, but I haven't yet grown out of that. Give me an afternoon nap and I'm like a much happier person. And the other piece we like to talk about is your second brain, your gut, which isn't often mentioned, and how much different vitamins and minerals can affect how your brain processes. Our fighting game champions, if you've ever seen a Tekken game, it's people fighting in like a 2D environment. Our fighting game Street Fighters and players, they're watching a screen 60 frames per second, they're counting frames. That's how fast their brain is processing information, right? So they know that a jab is 6 frames, and they have 4 frames to start to parry that attack. So they're counting frames. That's how fast their brains are processing. You really reduce that by 5%, 10%, 20% with the deficiency in vitamin D, and you're not even nearly competitive. That's showing up for a marathon with a broken leg. And people don't really understand just how important a healthy body is for a healthy mind. Even with things we talk about cardiovascular fitness, it's just like, well, I mean, be fit to twiddle your thumbs and control it. But the flow of oxygen to your brain through carotid arteries is directly related to how fit you are physically and through a cardio aspect, and that's how fast there's more oxygen in your brain, higher performance. So it does all come together. And that's what we want to talk to your kids about. So thanks to Berocca, we have been fully funded to come to your school, visit, speak at an assembly. It's a 10-minute slot, and we want to start teaching your kids those healthy digital habits. We're a sport, but we also have the responsibility to look after not just your physical well-being, but your digital well-being, and we sort of want to try and be like the kaitiaki for esports and our kids in that digital space. We can talk about cell phone bans, and we can talk about social media bans, but at the end of the day, our kids are always going to find a way, trust me, they will find a way. And we want to make sure that when they do, they at least have been given some of the education to make sure that they can live responsibly in the online world in which they will spend the rest of their lives, and that this can be a really happy and successful journey for them. So that is a little bit about esports. You can scan the QR code if you want to make a booking, schools@esf.nz if you want to talk to our schools coordinator, who will set up a time, and I think we'll also be handing out some flyers out inside the theatre after the presentation. But that is everything from me, so thank you very much.